Diddy's former dancer Adria English has spilled some serious tea about the notorious rapper, and the details are beyond disturbing. English was a go-go dancer for Diddy and was stationed at certain checkpoints at his freak-off parties. She claims she was used by Diddy to help set people up for blackmail. Here are her most disturbing claims from a recent interview, which get worse as the list goes on. And to be very clear, these are all just allegations that haven't yet been confirmed. Diddy refused to let a young dancer use the bathroom during one of his parties, so she just went number 2 on stage. Guest Denzel Washington watched this happen and stormed out of the party in pure disgust. Diddy once had a threesome with rapper Nelly and an unnamed underage girl. In the leaked photos of Diddy eating fruit off of a woman, she was actually 14 years old. An underage girl Diddy sexually abused had 2 of his children, and he helped deliver the babies at his own residence. At one party, Diddy made J-Lo stick a bottle in the private area of an 11-year-old girl. Diddy's 2 sons, Justin and Christian Combs, ran a train on Justin Bieber while he was tied down and sobbing. A young girl who witnessed this happening is part of the lawsuit against Diddy. The rapper apparently slapped her when she tried to loosen the straps on Bieber. And lastly, English herself says she was on one of the Diddy tapes as an underage girl being sexually abused by a former president. English has hinted that she'll be one of the witnesses to testify against Diddy in his upcoming trial. Getting into character for the Jobs movie, Ashton Kutcher tried Steve Jobs' diet, but he ended up in a hospital because it messed with his pancreas levels. It's likely no coincidence that Steve Jobs died from pancreatic cancer. Albert Einstein's last words were lost forever because he said them in German, which the nurse attending to him did not speak. The disclaimer of no animals were harmed during the making of this film isn't always true. It can be put on movies even if animals died during the production, as long as cameras weren't rolling at the time. The Heart Attack Grill is a restaurant in Las Vegas where people weighing over 350 pounds can eat for free. 3 people have died while eating there, and the only vegan option on the menu is cigarettes. If you don't want wrinkles but would prefer to stay away from Botox, this woman has a solution for you. To avoid wrinkles, Tess Christian claims to have not laughed or smiled for more than 40 years, even after the birth of her daughter. The individual animal with the most human kills ever was a tiger from northern India. After a tooth injury from a gunshot left her unable to hunt normal prey, she adjusted her hunting style to go for humans instead. She was shot and killed in 1907 with an estimated 436 human kills. Jeannie Wiley was locked in a room for 13 years by her father, who wanted to protect her from the outside world. He kept her tied in a straitjacket and would bark at her like a wild dog if she made any noise. When she was finally rescued, doctors said she had the cognitive abilities of a 1-year-old baby. During an interview with Stephen Hawking, the cameraman yanked out a cable that set off an alarm and caused Hawking to slump forward. Worried they had killed him, everyone rushed over to find Hawking laughing at his own joke. The alarm was from an office computer losing power. This guy got a tattoo of his daughter's last drawing before she passed away. As of 2006, about 75% of Chinese people didn't know that sharks were killed to make shark fin soup. But now more than 90% of China supports a nationwide ban thanks to activism efforts by people like Yao Ming. Trish Vickers was a blind author who wrote 26 pages of her first novel without realizing that her pen had run out of ink. But local police used forensic equipment to decipher the missing words, and the book was published on the day of her death. This Viking sword was found by reindeer hunters who were hiking at a high altitude in the mountains of Norway. It may have belonged to a Viking who lost his way and died here over 1,000 years ago. The Oseberg ship is a 9th century Viking ship that was discovered in nearly perfect condition in a burial mound in Norway. This iron helmet, dating back to the 10th century, was discovered in Norway in 1943. It is the only complete Viking helmet ever found, and contrary to popular belief, there was never any proof that Vikings wore horns on their helmets. This 1,000-year-old Viking axe head found in Denmark shows why the Vikings were known as pioneers of craftsmanship. An 8-year-old girl from Sweden found this 1,500-year-old Viking sword while swimming in a lake. Upon pulling the sword out of its resting place, she officially became High Queen of the Nordic realm. In 1952, Werner von Braun wrote a book called Project Mars about the first manned expedition to the Red Planet. The book imagined that human colonists on Mars would be led by a person named Elon. In 2013, a woman in Florida was waiting to buy Powerball tickets when she let an elderly lady go ahead of her in line. The 84-year-old lady ended up winning the $590 million jackpot. A Swedish woman lost her wedding ring in her garden until she found it 16 years later growing on a carrot. In 2001, the Taliban used dynamite to demolish this 4th century Buddha statue that was carved in Afghanistan. While initially devastating, it was found that the explosions had revealed 50 caves that were untouched for 1600 years. Inside the caves, researchers uncovered some ancient Buddhist relics, including the oldest oil paintings in the world. In the 1980s, actor Steve Buscemi was a New York City firefighter for 5 years. So when 9/11 happened, he showed up at his old firehouse the very next day to volunteer. For an entire week, he worked 12-hour shifts digging through rubble to find missing firefighters. After a bad cycling accident in 2009, UK man Dan Black became paralyzed from the waist down. So he spent the next 4 years raising $26,000 to pay for a stem cell treatment that might help him walk again. However, upon hearing about a disabled boy who needed a similar surgery but had a better chance of success, he donated all the money to him instead. This man abducted, raped, and killed a 10-year-old girl named Katie Coleman in 2005. Unfortunately for him, he was sent to the same prison as Katie's cousin Jared, who tattooed the words Katie's Revenge across the killer's forehead. Here are some stories of feral children who were raised by animals. In 1986, 3-year-old Oksana Malaya was left outside by her abusive parents, so she walked to a nearby shed that was inhabited by wild dogs. When she was rescued 6 years later, she barked, walked on all fours, and had acquired heightened senses for hearing and smelling. Today she lives in a mental hospital and has the social capabilities of a 5-year-old. A Russian boy named Vanya Yudin was raised in a room surrounded by birds in cages because his mom thought he was a pet. When he was rescued in 2008 at the age of 7, he could only communicate by chirping and flapping his arms. Indian sisters Kamala and Amala were found in a wolf's den in 1920. They ran on all fours, ate nothing but raw meat, and didn't look human. They were deformed at the arms and legs and had no interest in interacting with people. Sadly, they had a hard time adjusting to society and died within 10 years. In 2005, Eric Torpy was sentenced to 30 years in prison for shooting with intent to kill. But as per his request, his sentence was extended to 33 years to match Larry Bird's jersey number. Wealthy Chinese people have been known to hire body doubles to get prosecuted for their crimes. It's such a common practice that there's even a term for it called ding zoi, aka substitute criminal. By definition, an outlaw is a criminal who has been sentenced to be outside the protection of the law. He has no right to trial and can be killed or prosecuted by anyone. 6 Georgia inmates out on work detail saved a deputy sheriff who collapsed unconscious. They could have taken his gun and fled with the work van, but instead used his phone to call 911. The sheriff's office gave the inmates a pizza party and recommended reduced sentences. Burglars once unknowingly broke into Dolph Lundgren's home and tied up his wife. But they fled immediately when they found a family photo and realized whose house they were in. In 1971, a thief broke into a house and was shot in the legs by a trap set up by the homeowner. The thief then sued for damages and ended up winning the case. A Minnesota burglar was caught after he logged into his own Facebook account on the computer in the house he was robbing. The homeowner returned to find the man's account still logged in. In 2013, burglars broke into an office building to steal all the computers. But after realizing they were robbing a non-profit organization that helps victims of sexual assault, they returned everything they had stolen and left a heartfelt letter of apology. Preserved carcass of a 39,000-year-old woolly mammoth was discovered in Russian permafrost. Nicknamed Yuka, the animal is so well preserved that even its brain remains intact. This Roman toddler footprint has been preserved on this tile for more than 2,000 years. This pocket watch found on a Titanic victim is stopped at 2:28, just a few minutes before its owner fell into the icy Atlantic waters. This 2,200-year-old mummy named Lady Di is considered the best preserved mummy in the world. Her skin, organs, and veins are still well intact, as doctors could still perform a checkup and even a gynecological exam. She was preserved in 21 gallons of a liquid that remains a mystery to this day. In her Firefox search history, Casey Anthony had foolproof suffocation methods from the day before her daughter died. But police overlooked this evidence because they only checked her search history from Internet Explorer. Throughout his life, Ernest Hemingway survived malaria, anthrax, pneumonia, dysentery, skin cancer, diabetes, hepatitis, a ruptured kidney, spleen, and liver, a crushed vertebrae, and a fractured skull. He also survived 2 separate plane crashes in a 2-day span while on an African safari. In 2013, a French businessman died of a heart attack while having an affair with a stranger during a company trip. A French court ruled that this was an industrial accident and that his wife and family were. These are some morbid facts that you didn't know about ancient Rome. Compared to today's standards, ancient Romans were pretty disgusting. They had public toilets that were never cleaned and there was no toilet paper. Instead, you had to wipe yourself with a sponge on a stick that everyone shared. The Romans also made their toothpaste out of mouse brains and used urine as mouthwash and detergent. The urine industry was so big that there was even a tax on it for a period of time. But if just living in ancient Rome sounds bad enough, you better not have been a criminal. During halftime at some arenas, certain criminals were torn apart by wild animals. Some prisoners were also substituted into plays as punishment, so if a character died in the play's story, a real criminal would die on stage. And the worst of the worst criminals, such as men found guilty of rape, often had their testicles crushed between 2 stones. Raccoon dog is a species related to foxes that's indigenous to East Asia. It is the only species of wild dog that hibernates during the winter. Known as scaly-foot gastropods, volcano snails are a real thing. They have shells made from iron sulfides and are typically found near hydrothermal vents that can reach 750 degrees Fahrenheit. Leoconcha hieroglyphica is a mollusk that received its name because it looks like it's covered in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. The leaf sheep sea slug is often considered to be half plant, half animal. By absorbing chloroplasts from algae, it's the only known animal that can perform photosynthesis. The black swallower is a fish that can swallow food more than 10 times its own mass thanks to its expansive stomach. In 2007, this swallower measuring just 7 inches long was found dead after it tried to digest a 34-inch mackerel. In the Civil War, twice as many soldiers died from diseases than battle injuries. Dysentery and chronic diarrhea were so prevalent that there was an honor code among soldiers to never shoot a man while he's pooping. This is a photo comparison of Abraham Lincoln before and after the war. Many Cherokee Indians sided and fought with the Confederacy during the Civil War. This was because many of them were black slave owners themselves and they still resented the Union for the Trail of Tears. Confederate soldier W.V. Meadows was shot in the eye during the Battle of Vicksburg. He survived and 58 years later he coughed the bullet out of his mouth. Until the Civil War, Robert E. Lee owned a plantation across the river from Washington, D.C. Once the Union Army captured the land, they started burying Union soldiers there to spite Lee. Today, that property is known as Arlington Cemetery. World War I and II, fingers were used to reconstruct noses. The patients got a new nose but lost a finger in return. A Japanese soldier named Hiru Onada was stranded on an island for 30 years without knowing that World War II had ended. His commander had to travel to the island to personally dismiss him in 1974. Upon returning home, he became a national hero. More planes were destroyed during World War II than the number of planes that exist in the entire world today. Some warships used to be painted like optical illusions. The purpose of this dazzle camouflage was not to conceal a ship, but rather to mislead the enemy by making the ship's speed and range more difficult to estimate, much to the same effect as patterns seen on zebras, jaguars, and giraffes. After Heath Ledger died while filming the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, Johnny Depp, Jude Law, and Colin Farrell all agreed to star in the film so that it could be completed. Afterwards, they all donated their salaries to Heath Ledger's 4-year-old daughter. After the death of his wife, a man from Argentina planted this guitar-shaped forest so that she could see it from heaven. In 1986, a young Indian flight attendant named Nirja Banat was on a plane when it was hijacked. The terrorists were targeting Americans, so she hid the passports of all 44 Americans on board. Instead of saving herself, she helped the passengers escape and died while shielding 3 children from a hail of gunfire. One of the children on board is now a captain for a major airline and says that Banat was his #1 inspiration. Eugene Azarinsky was the researcher who discovered REM sleep, aka dreaming. In 1998, he died in a car crash after falling asleep at the wheel. Jeremy Moody was a guest at a party for lifeguards who were celebrating going an entire season without anyone drowning. But at the end of the party, with over 100 lifeguards present, Jeremy's body was found at the bottom of the pool. A Nebraska man named Derek Keeper was an anti-seatbelt advocate who wrote about why seatbelt laws shouldn't be a thing. 4 months later, he died in a car accident after not wearing a seatbelt, while his 2 friends who were wearing seatbelts survived. In 2011, a 49-year-old Russian woman was wrongly declared dead by doctors. At her own funeral, she suddenly woke up but was so horrified that she suffered a heart attack and died for real. In 1977, Bob Marley was diagnosed with skin cancer on his toe and was told that having it amputated would stop the spread. But he refused the surgery since his Rastafarian religion saw amputation as a sin. By summer of 1980, the cancer had metastasized throughout Marley's entire body, and he died soon afterwards. When 2-year-old Rosalia Lombardo died from the Spanish flu in 1920, her grieving father insisted on her being preserved. Known as the Sleeping Beauty, she was one of the last to be buried in Sicily's Capuchin catacombs. This photo was taken in 1982, 62 years after she died. In the year 2000, a partially paralyzed old man was in his outhouse when the floor suddenly collapsed. He fell through and was immediately surrounded by excrement, spiders, maggots, and rats. He was stuck for more than 3 days until his mailman thankfully found him. This woman's husband and son died in a car crash while driving home from an Italian soccer match. She was invited to the next game to discover that all the players and staff were wearing shirts to honor them. In 2017, a 9 weeks pregnant Brazilian woman suffered a stroke and was declared legally dead. Although doctors said the babies had no hope for survival, the brain-dead woman was kept alive for 123 days before delivering a pair of healthy twins. You may remember when Bat Kid Miles Scott saved the city of San Francisco while battling leukemia in 2013. That same boy is now cancer-free. After a 2018 boating accident in Nigeria, a man named Blankson sacrificed his life to save 13 people. By the 14th trip, he was completely exhausted and ended up drowning, but he was the only fatality of the accident. These are some of the oldest living animals ever recorded. Harriet the Galapagos tortoise was collected by Charles Darwin in 1835 while he was discovering evolution. She died at the age of 175 as a beloved member of Steve Irwin's Australia Zoo. The world's oldest living spider died at the age of 43. Named number 16, she only died after being stung by a wasp. In 2007, a bowhead whale was found with the end of a harpoon stuck in its neck. It was found that the harpoon tip dated back to the year 1890, proving that the bowhead whale is the world's oldest known living mammal. Born in 1751, a koi fish named Hanako reportedly died at the age of 226 in the year 1977. And finally, the Greenland shark is believed to be the oldest living vertebrate species in the world. This specimen is believed to be around 400 years old, meaning it was roaming the depths before the Pilgrims entered America. In proportion to body weight, koalas have one of the smallest brains of any mammal. They're so dumb that when presented with leaves on a flat surface instead of on branches, they are unable to recognize them as food and will not eat them. Dogs get sprayed by skunks so often because skunks raise their tails as a warning. Dogs see this as "come smell my butt," which is the exact opposite message of what the skunk is trying to send. In Germany, it is illegal to kill any vertebrate animal without proper reason. Because of this, all German animal shelters are no-kill. In the 1980s, Ken the orangutan escaped from his enclosure at the San Diego Zoo multiple times. His apparent goals were visiting other animals, taking photos with tourists, and throwing rocks at his orangutan rival. Mike Tyson got into his first fight after a bully ripped the head off of one of his pigeons. He said that the pigeon was the first thing that he ever loved and inspired him to become a fighter. There are more Panda Express locations in the world than actual pandas. When people die from Alzheimer's, it's usually because the disease got so bad that they forgot how to swallow or breathe. There's a blue whale who sings at such a high frequency that he's unable to communicate with other whales. Nicknamed 52 Blue, his calls have been heard every year since the 1980s but never receive a response. He's been called the world's loneliest whale. Morbid Facts, Part 167. Mike Tyson got into his first fight after a bully ripped the head off of one of his pigeons. He said that the pigeon was the first thing that he ever loved and inspired him to become a fighter. There are more Panda Express locations in the world than actual pandas. In 1981, a Turkish man shot Pope John Paul II 4 times but didn't kill him. After the Pope recovered, he visited the assassin in prison and gave him his forgiveness. The assassin was soon pardoned at the Pope's request, and 33 years after his crime, he visited Vatican City and laid flowers on the Pope's tomb. Ancient Romans were known to build tombs for their dogs and even gave them epitaphs to remember them by. One such inscription read, "I am in tears while carrying you to your last resting place, as much as I rejoiced when bringing you home with my own hands 15 years ago." Liviu Librescu was a Holocaust survivor who eventually became a professor at Virginia Tech. During the Virginia Tech shooting, he held the door of his classroom, sacrificing his life to save 22 of his 23 students while the shooter continuously shot through the door. A man from Kerala, India set a Guinness World Record by putting 60,000 bees on his face for more than 4 hours. He says bees are his best friends and will only sting him if he treats them improperly. In order to tell whether a female is ready to mate, male giraffes will drink their urine. Sand tiger shark embryos fight to the death in their mother's womb and only the strongest survive. DNA testing revealed that this is due to embryos from different fathers competing to be born. Snails' teeth are the strongest known biological material on the planet. They're stronger than spider silk and can withstand pressure high enough to turn carbon into diamonds. According to a new study, fish eggs can survive and hatch after passing through a duck. This provides one explanation as to how completely isolated bodies of water can become stocked with fish. These are some pets that came back from the dead. In 1923, the Brazier family was visiting relatives in Indiana when their dog Bobby suddenly ran away. After days of searching, they returned to their home in Silverton, Oregon, expecting to never see their dog again. But 6 months later, Bobby miraculously returned home after venturing close to 3,000 miles across the Rocky Mountains and the Mississippi River. In 2015, a cat that was hit by a car and buried for 5 days managed to crawl out of its grave and back home. Despite appearing much worse, he only suffered a broken jaw and the loss of an eye. In 1982, the Almeida family lost their pet tortoise Manuela while their house was being renovated. 30 years later, they were cleaning out their attic after their father died and amazingly found Manuela still alive. They think she was able to survive by eating termites in the furniture that their father was hoarding. A woman battling breast cancer married the love of her life just 18 hours before passing away. The couple had a ceremony at a hospital chapel, and her final moments were nothing short of beautiful. In 1996, Bear Grylls broke his back after falling 16,000 feet due to a torn parachute. Doctors said he would never walk again, but 2 years later, he climbed Mount Everest. In 2009, Barry Delaney honored a lifelong pact he made with his best friend who was a British soldier. They agreed that whoever died first, the other had to wear a dress to their funeral. In 1986, a 5-year-old boy fell into a gorilla enclosure and lost consciousness. But to everyone's surprise, a male gorilla named Jumbo stood between the boy and the other gorillas in a protective gesture. He made sure the boy was okay and even rubbed his back. This incident helped create a positive public perception of gorillas. When Pennsylvania Treasurer Bud Dwyer was accused of taking a bribe in 1987, he called for a live news conference. During the conference, he pulled a revolver out of an envelope and shot himself through the mouth. His suicide was broadcasted later that day to a wide television audience across Pennsylvania. Napoleon Bonaparte was buried with all of his body parts except for one, his schlong. It is currently owned by a private collector in New Jersey who recently declined a $100,000 offer. Waste shopping was a popular execution method in ancient China that involved sawing the body clean in half. It was abolished in 1734 after a Chinese official was cut in half and still managed to write the Chinese word for awful 7 times in his own blood. These are some morbid facts that you didn't know about the Columbine Massacre. This Columbine Class of '99 photo was taken just a few months before the shooting. In the top left corner, shooters Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold can be seen making shooting gestures at the camera while wearing sunglasses. This is a game of hangman that a group of students played while they were locked in their classroom during the shooting. While being at one mass shooting is horrifying and unlucky enough, Regina Rode was at 2 of them. 8 years after surviving Columbine, she was a student at Virginia Tech when 32 people were killed. On the day of the shooting, two 10-kilogram bombs were planted in the school cafeteria right before lunch. Luckily, the bombs failed to detonate, otherwise all 488 students in the cafeteria at the time could have died. These melted chairs were the result of Dylan Klebold trying to set off one of those bombs with a Molotov cocktail. Female mummies in ancient Egypt were always more decomposed than their male counterparts. Researchers would later discover that this was because male bodies were embalmed a lot sooner than female bodies. Unlike male bodies, female bodies were kept at the family home until they started to decompose. The only reason this was done was to prevent the embalmers from getting weird with the bodies. Children who are victims of hot car deaths are often found with large portions of their hair ripped out. The only reason dogs love squeaky toys is because they sound like little animals dying. Every unborn baby grows a mustache in the womb, which then spreads to cover the entire body. The baby then eats this fine hair called lanugo, then excretes it after birth with their first bowel movement. 2012, a Jesus statue in India had water mysteriously dripping from its toes. Worshippers flocked from all over to collect and sometimes drink this miracle water. But soon enough, the source of the water was found to be a clogged toilet near the statue. After the Tiananmen Square massacre, the Chinese government sent bills to the families of the protesters for the cost of the bullets used to kill their loved ones. Over the last 10 years, about 10 Americans have been accidentally shot by dogs. 5 of them happened in Florida. Jeremy Rodale was a longevity expert who popularized the term organic food. While filming an interview for the Dick Cavett Show, he declared, "I've decided to live to be 100 and I've never felt better in my life." But minutes later, Rodale died of a heart attack while still being filmed. 1903, Topsy the elephant was executed by poisoning, strangulation, and electrocution. A 74-second video of the electrocution was recorded and preserved by Thomas Edison. It may have been the first time ever that death was captured in a motion picture film. In 1854, a 13-year-old boy died in San Francisco after a circus clown swung him around by the heels. A Frenchman named Tarare was famous in the 1700s for his endless appetite. He was reported to have eaten live snakes, cats, lizards, and puppies. In one case, he ate a meal intended for 15 people in a single sitting. While being treated in a hospital for his condition, he was caught trying to drink other patients' blood and eat corpses from the morgue. After being suspected of eating a toddler, he was ejected from the hospital. Godzilla was originally created to symbolize the atomic bombings and a victim of them. He's covered in keloid scars to depict the brutal body scars of survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Survivors who suffered the most from the bombings were in such horrific condition that people called them ant-walking alligators. They were described to be faceless with their heads transformed into blackened alligator hides with red holes indicating mouths. Just months after the bombings, Kix cereal offered an atomic bomb-shaped ring in exchange for a box top and 15 cents. While the atomic bombings were devastating, the most destructive bombing raid in world history actually took place a few months earlier. The US Army used incendiary bombs to light a giant flaming X over the center of Tokyo. It left at least 100,000 civilians dead and 1 million more homeless. Morbidly Wholesome, Part 13. Remember this kid? He was saved by a dog when his parents left him in a garbage bin to die with his umbilical cord still attached. This is what he looks like now. Eitzaz Hassan was only 15 years old when he tackled a suicide bomber who tried entering his school. Sadly, he was killed but succeeded in saving hundreds of his fellow schoolmates. A Brazilian police officer was saved when his Nokia in his back pocket stopped a bullet that was fired at him. In 2015, a Texas father saved his son's life when doctors wrongly declared him brain dead and wanted to take him off life support. He barricaded himself in the hospital with a gun and had a 3-hour standoff with a SWAT team until his son squeezed his hand. The son went on to have a full recovery. On New Year's Eve in 2011, a suicide bomber planned on blowing up Moscow's crowded Red Square with a mobile phone bomb. But her plan failed when she received a spam text wishing her a Happy New Year. This caused the bomb to go off while she was still at the safe house and she was the only fatality. The Great Whiskey Fire of Dublin killed 13 people in 1875, but none of them died as a result of smoke inhalation or burns. All victims died of alcohol poisoning as a result of drinking the free whiskey. In 1871, Ohio lawyer Clement Vallandigham was defending a client who was charged with murder. While showing the court how the victim might have accidentally shot himself, Clement accidentally shot himself. He won the case, but he died. While it looks like something from Star Wars, the Valais Blacknose is a species of domestic sheep found in Switzerland. They're known for their shaggy coats, spiral horns, and pitch-black faces. A Russian helicopter discovered this strange giant crater in Siberian permafrost. Some scientists say it's a new type of sinkhole, but its true origins remain a mystery. There's a species of octopus that cares for her eggs for 53 months without eating, then dies. This is the longest brooding period of any known animal species. Farmers in Botswana have started painting faces on their cows' butts to prevent lions from sneaking up on them. The New Mexico whiptail is a species of lizard that is 100% female. Nicknamed the lesbian lizards, they still mate with each other to stimulate egg growth without transferring genetics. The ancient Romans didn't have toothpaste or toothbrushes, but they had perfect teeth because their diets were so low in sugar. The Guinness Book of World Records recognizes the 1927 presidential election of Liberia as the most fraudulent in history. Although there were only 15,000 registered voters in Liberia at the time, Charles D.B. King received 234,000 and won the election. Incest was encouraged in ancient Egypt, as with many aristocracies, to keep the bloodline pure. Moreover, if they were twins and one was a boy and one was a girl, they were married at birth because it was assumed that they must have banged in the womb. In 2009, a Florida woman named Marie Moore shot and killed her own son at a shooting range before taking her own life. She had left a note that said, "I'm so sorry. I had to send my son to heaven and myself to hell." She said that she could have only killed herself, but felt that she needed to, quote, save her son and the rest of the world. She wrote, "Hopefully when I die, there will be 1,000 years of peace." Two murderers can be seen in the background of Mark Jackson's Hoops basketball card from 1990. The Menendez brothers had murdered their parents and bought courtside tickets with their parents' money before they were convicted. In 1949, 12-year-old Charles Cohen hid inside of a closet while a mass murderer shot and killed his whole family. Nearly 70 years later, his granddaughter would survive the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School shooting by hiding in a closet. Alexander I of Yugoslavia refused to make a public appearance on a Tuesday after 3 of his family members died on a Tuesday. After finally being forced to appear on a Tuesday, he was promptly assassinated. In 2010, an MI6 agent was found naked and dead inside of a padlocked bag in his London home. Police concluded that he accidentally locked himself in the bag and died as a result. In 2001, a man was shot dead while testing out a bulletproof potion that he received from a witch doctor. After applying the potion for 2 weeks, he asked a fellow villager to shoot him so that he could test it out. Turns out the potion was just cherry Kool-Aid and the man died instantly. These are some morbid facts that you didn't know about the Lincoln assassination. Lincoln's bodyguard was an alcoholic who had previously gotten in trouble for drinking on the job. He wasn't at his post to protect Lincoln that night because he was next door drinking at the Star Saloon, the same saloon where John Wilkes Booth was drinking to build up the courage to assassinate the president. The chair that Lincoln was shot in still has his bloodstains on it. John Wilkes Booth also planned on assassinating Ulysses S. Grant along with Lincoln, but he didn't attend the play because his wife was on bad terms with Lincoln's wife at the time. Instead, the other man in Lincoln's balcony was military officer Henry Rathbone. After the assassination, he was overwhelmed with guilt for the rest of his life for not preventing it. He slowly went mad and eventually stabbed his wife to death before he was committed to a mental asylum for the rest of his life. During World War II, Pope Pius XII told the United States that he couldn't confirm reports that Germany was executing Jews. But in 2020, newly unsealed documents revealed that he was lying and knew all along that the Holocaust was happening. Homosexual males were identified in concentration camps by downward-facing pink triangles. Because of this identification, many of them were still considered criminals after their camps were freed. As a result, many of them were sent back to prison to serve out their terms. In the 1980s, a Holocaust denial group offered $50,000 to anyone who could prove that gas chambers were used at Auschwitz. They were forced by judge to pay that and an additional $40,000 to Auschwitz survivor Mel Mermelstein, who provided the proof.